Why every church needs a leadership pipeline. Right now on the Church Revitalization Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast, brought to you by the Malphurs Group team, where each week we tackle important, actionable topics to help churches thrive. And now, here's your hosts, Scott Ball and A.J. Mathieu.
Welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast. My name is Scott Ball. I'm joined by my friend and co-host, A.J. Mathieu.
Hey.
All right, A.J., we're the last time we had a bit of a series, we called it a non-series series. I think by not calling it a series, even though it was a series, people still listened to it. We did at the beginning of this year, we did like a multi-week kind of covering of the basics.
Yeah, of church revitalization.
Of church revitalization. And so if you know the Malphurs Group, if you know what it is that we do, we really focus on two things. One is strategic, what we call strategic envisioning, which is focused on church revitalization. The other thing that we really focus on is leadership development, which we call leadership pipeline design. So consider this a fundamentals, basics, non-series series over the next, we won't tell you how many weeks, on leadership pipeline design to give you some of the basics of that. It continues to be one of the things we get asked about the most, AJ, is what is a leadership pipeline and do I need one? So we thought we would actually start this non-series series with answering that very question. Does my church need a leadership pipeline, with a episode entitled Why Every Church Needs a Leadership Pipeline. So there you go. Anything I need to say by way of introduction?
That's good. And I'm just going to start right off and say, yes, every church does need a leadership pipeline, whether you think you need it or not. If you think you don't, you probably need it worse than anybody else. So,
well, I mean, let's just say, if you have ever struggled to find volunteers, if you have ever felt like you don't have a qualified person to sit on a board or a committee, if you've ever felt like you've dragged some warm bodies to fill seats because that's what you had to do, if you've ever felt like you've got the same 20% of people doing 80% of the work, if any of those things or all of those things have ever happened to you, you need a leadership pipeline.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And we could just probably end the episode right there, but we'll go into more detail.
I'm anxious to dig into this over the next few weeks because some of the details we're going to get into, you're going to want to tune in every week, because some of the details that we get into, I think, are really, really helpful. And they're things that just, I think we're going to take you into some spaces where you're like, oh, we could really get more specific and intentional in some of this stuff. Because there's a lot more to it than just like, all right, let's figure out a new way of talking about a volunteer area of the church that nobody seems to want to do, or something like that. So, I think it's really good. But so where do you want to jump in? How about we start in the Bible? You want to start in the Bible?
I think that's, let's do Bible. I think that's the best place to start.
This is kind of a tradition here at the Malphurs Group that we start fundamental concepts of church health and leadership in the Bible. So, and it's a great story that we find in the Old Testament with our good friend Moses. So Scott, walk us through Moses and his delightful father-in-law Jethro, and the interaction that they have that is a wonderful leadership model.
Yes, it's Exodus 18, right? That's where we're at, Exodus 18. So in Exodus 18, up to this point, everything has just turned out great for Moses. And Moses doesn't think that. Moses thinks leadership's been hard. But he doesn't know the definition of hard at this point. All of the stuff that's really hard is still to come. Up to this point, they've crossed the Red Sea, no problem. I mean, I know it was intense, but I mean, a miracle happened. He parts the Red Sea, or God does through him. They run out of water. They find some water. It's bitter. He puts his staff in the thing. Boom, Evian. He goes, they're out. They don't plan well, apparently. So they're out of water again. And God tells him, strike the rock. This is when he was allowed to strike the rock. He strikes the rock. Water comes from the rock. Oh no, now they're being chased by these I think it's the Amalekites, and so they got to go into battle. These folks have never been in a battle before. They've been slaves. Moses has a couple buddies hold his arms up for him during battle, and they win. So everything has turned out great so far. They've had challenges for sure, but everything's worked out great. And up to this point, Moses' wife has not been with him. She had stayed back during the freeing of the slaves. And so now Jethro, the father-in-law, comes along with the wife and the kid to dump them back off with Moses. And Moses is sharing everything that has happened up to this point. And then the following day, Jethro observes the way that Moses is leading. And he is not impressed. And his response to him is, hey, the way that you are leading is not good. And this echoes language we get in Genesis when the Lord sees Adam alone and he says it's not good for man to be alone. You see this parallel language happening in Exodus 18 where he's saying to Moses, hey, the way that you're leading is not good. You're leading alone. He says, surely you and those with you will be burned out, essentially, and it's not good for you. And it's not good for the people. So he says, listen to my words and God will be with you. Listen to my advice and God will be with you. He says, look for able men from all the people, men who fear God, who are trustworthy and hate a bribe, and place such men over the people as chiefs of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens. I'm pretty impressed with remembering that
I was gonna
whole.
say, did you pull it up or are you
No,
okay?
I gotta.
I'm impressed too because it
Yeah,
didn't look like you were looking at another screen reading that. So
no. It's right from the old noggin.
I could have paraphrased it, but I was like, this is
I
really
don't think that I can remember what I ate yesterday for lunch, but I've got that one. I think it's Exodus 18:24, I think. But um anyways, so Moses listens, he responds, he's like, okay, we should definitely do that. And so he responds to his father-in-law Jethro, the Midianite priest. He's not a Hebrew, he's not a Jew, but he recognizes that
not a Christian.
wisdom, not a Christian, uh obviously, uh that wisdom, true wisdom, despite the source, comes from the Father, comes from God.
Jethro was attributing it to God
Jethro was attributing it to
in
God.
passing
Yes,
it on to Moses. Yeah.
that's right. Yeah. So when we talk about a leadership pipeline, all of the components are there in this verse. So we see the competencies for leadership in able men who fear God, are trustworthy, and hate a bribe. And as we get later on into this non-series series, we'll chat about what competencies mean and how we should think about them. But that's a key component of a good leadership pipeline, is defining the competencies for leadership. We also see a structure for leadership. He says, place such men over the people as chiefs of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and tens. So we see a stratified leadership structure so that certain challenges and certain responsibilities are dealt with at various levels, and not every single problem is delivered up to the highest levels of leadership. So principally, if every problem at your church lands on your desk as the pastor in some way, shape, or form, you're doing it wrong. You're like Moses in Exodus 18, and you're going, wow, what a miracle. God has pulled me out of all these messes. And you consider me your father-in-law coming to you and saying, this isn't good. God has been bailing you out, which is amazing and a testament to his goodness. But this is not sustainable. What you're doing is not sustainable. It's not right.
Yeah.
It's
not only not good for Moses, it's not good for the people either.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly.
I mean, there was I don't think the text is explicit, but you can bet there was some grumbling in the long lines for Moses to sit as judge over, the small claims issue you had with your neighbor.
100%. Right. And then I think it's worth mentioning here too. I mean, we could spend the whole episode just talking about Moses and Jethro, but I'd also like to point out Jesus, I think the master leader, developer. And again, we could spend a whole episode and maybe we should spend a whole episode on Moses, and we should spend a whole episode sometime on Jesus. But for the purposes of a broad overview on why every church needs a leadership pipeline, let me say this about Jesus. Jesus didn't see much of a distinction between leadership development and discipleship. He
Mm.
saw them as two sides of the same coin. So what you see in Jesus's earthly ministry and would point to and go, oh, well, that time he spent with his disciples, depending on your perspective, you might say, oh, that's discipleship.
Yeah.
Yes. Or you might say, oh, that's leadership development.
Yeah.
Yes. And Jesus, the end, the nugget, sort of the seed, the the seed of his ministry that's planted by the time we get to Acts chapter 2 is just 120 people. 120 people. That's it. For all the crowds that he had and all the people who fed, when we get to Acts chapter 2, it's 120 people in an upper room. They can all fit in one room. That's it. And but not 120 random people, not 120 stragglers, not 120 hangers on. These are 120 people who had been discipled by Jesus,
Hmm.
had been developed as leaders by Jesus and the other disciples. And it's about having the right 120 people in the room so that when the power came on in Acts chapter 2 at Pentecost, they were immediately able to disciple 3,000 new believers.
Yeah.
And something I say to churches all the time when I work with them one-on-one in this leadership pipeline design process is I like to say, it may be God's own wisdom and divine forbearance in that he's not pouring out a work of the Spirit like a Pentecost in your church because you don't have the leaders
Mm.
to disciple them.
Boy.
Acts chapter 2, verse 41 says, and they, or 42 says, and they devoted themselves, that's the 3,000,
Yeah.
to the apostles' teaching, to the breaking of bread and the prayers and so on.
Hmm.
Who's who is doing this work with them? It's not just the 12. It was too much for them. We hear about that in Acts 6. So who's doing this? It's this 120. Um, and then very quickly they're having to add on, and we read as we go further on that these other disciples are being built up as deacons and built up later on as
Hmm.
elders in churches and so on. So um, just ask yourself this question: Is God actually showing you grace by not pouring out tons of new people on your church because your church isn't ready for those folks because you don't have the leaders in place for it? And
Yeah.
if that's true, then we need to be focused on leadership development. That's where we should be focusing on um, as pastors and as church leaders. Um, they're not antithetical. Outreach and leadership development aren't antithetical. It's like if we
Yeah.
really want to have outreach, we really need to have leaders in place.
Yeah, for sure. And as we get into our not a series and explore this deeper, I mean, having structure in the church for the next layer down of leadership being discipled or developed by the one above is what makes all this work. It's what makes the church scalable. And I mean, Second Timothy 2:2 comes to mind. I mean, this
Mhm.
the things that are being taught to somebody is going to they're going to be equipped then to teach the others.
Right.
So I mean, I think that's an additional great biblical fit in here, that this is how scale happens in a worldwide movement,
That's right.
starting from your local church.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, again, we could probably spend a whole episode just on the biblical roots of why this is important, but I think that will cover us for the purposes of today's episode.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's a great overview, and some areas that, if you haven't looked at those passages again, definitely go back and check out Exodus 18. And of course, you're all well familiar with the book of Acts as the church was beginning to build out. And it's clearly needs leaders. Paul spent a lot of time discipling people, and launching them into ministry, and we've got some key texts about that in his letters.
Yeah, again, I don't want to get stuck here, but I mean, I think again, we have a tendency to hyper spiritualize the language, and
Mm.
we see these things in the epistles, and we don't we just see we see them in one through a lens And we were having a hard time translating that to our time and go, no, this is the same thing. Like when he says, oh, this is my spiritual son or whatever, like we make this some spiritual thing. Okay, no, but what do you do with your kids? You bring them alongside of you, you teach them things, and you raise them up. It's leadership development. Like it's like, and you don't see that specific
Yeah,
language. You don't see that
right.
specific language in the text, but that's what it is.
It, yeah, you don't, there's not really a need to separate the spiritual from, I guess, what you would say the practical in
No,
building someone up. You're teaching somebody not only in like, knowledge, but in wisdom, which are two different things. And preparing them to do what you do and hopefully even better. So, but we're
right,
in the context of the church, it should all be spiritual. It should all have spiritual practices involved in it and disciplines and understanding and
right.
calling on the source, the spirit, the source of what allows us to understand all things that are right and wise and applying them appropriately and timely to build up the church, because that's what we're here to do. We're here to build the church. So,
Yeah. Amen.
yeah,
All right,
I'm
we need to
all
move
in
on.
on biblical basis for leadership development.
100%. We could talk about it all day, but we should move forward.
All right. All right. Where are we at? The impact that it's going to have on your church. I mean, so yeah, talking about the practical, it allowed Moses to expand the capacity of his leadership by having others trained and equipped and launched. And I guess sneak preview, assessing, training, and launching leaders is what we're going to talk about in the coming weeks as this cycle. Which again, coming back to Jesus, I mean, he I don't know, he recruited people, he trained them, he launched them, he assessed them, and it becomes a cycle. No matter where your on ramp is, it becomes a cycle of assessing, training, and launching people into ministry. But this, again, as we already said, is how your church scales, and it's how you're prepared to grow. So the shortage of leaders in churches, I think, I don't know, Scott. I mean, we can't speak to the mind of God, but we do know churches that are healthy and equipped to scale. We see that element of blessing poured out that they do, because when you expand your leadership team, I mean, look, you can only do so much as one person, or as a senior leader, or as an elder in your church, or maybe some other pastoral position. You can only do so much. Increasing
Mhm.
the number of people that are equipped to do what you do, and maybe in niche areas of the church and special areas of gifting, um, you're able to do, your quantity of ministry can increase. And we would like to teach you principles in which the quality of your ministry increases as well. But this is where we're going to avoid burnout in the church, where we're going to continue to see, I think, momentum and excitement as the church grows, because again, the ministry is enlarging, and our impact in the kingdom is going to exponentially increase.
Yeah. Yeah, all of that's good. So the need for intentional leadership development is great because if you were gone tomorrow, and which could happen. I mean, heaven forbid, something could happen to you, you could fall ill, you could just get another opportunity, the Lord could call you to another place. And so the need for intentional leadership development is about getting beyond thinking about the moment. You've got to think about what's coming up, what's coming ahead, and looking at all. And that's not just about you and your position, it's about every single volunteer position in the church. Is there a next man up situation? One of the things that we've long talked on this podcast, that I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan, and it's depressing. It's a depressing lifestyle, to tell you the truth, to a large degree. But one of the things that I'm always surprised at is, and I was listening to Jerry Jones a couple of weeks ago talk about this, is people have complained in the off season this year that they haven't really made a splash as it relates to bringing in some free agents, some big names from other teams to take care of some of the losses that we've had. We've had some big names from our team get signed by other teams. Don't worry, AJ, there's a point to this.
Okay.
Uh, that even you will get, because I know you're not a sports fan. But one of the things that Jerry Jones said, and I've got lots of criticisms for him in general, but I thought this is correct. He said, the big names are on the roster. And what he meant was they're not big names today, but they will be big names tomorrow.
Hmm.
Because we've been growing, we drafted this guy 2 years ago. We've been building him up. He's been getting better. He's been improving. And, he hasn't had a chance to be a big name on the field because some other person has been the big name on the field. But now that person is gone. And so now it's this person's moment
Hmm.
to be the big name. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think when you look at professional sports, you see this system. You see it in baseball, you see it in American football. I don't know a European. I don't know of soccer, football as well as I know these American sports, but the idea is similar. You're going to grow good athletes over a long period of time. And
Mm-hmm.
someone who's not a big name today might be a big name tomorrow because they have their
Yeah.
opportunity. The
Mm-hmm.
problem that in the church is we don't think this way. We don't have a farming
Mm-hmm.
system for leaders. We think we put someone in place and they're there for forever and then they're gone and then we go, we're praying for the Lord to raise a leader up.
Yeah.
That's like harvesting a crop and saying, well, we're praying that the Lord will bring another carrot tomorrow. It's like, no, you didn't plant the seed. You didn't water it. You didn't make sure it was fertilized. You didn't make sure it got sunlight. You didn't weed you don't get the crop without the seeding and the watering and the fertilizing. And so the
Yeah.
need for leadership development is that leaders don't grow overnight.
Mm-hmm.
They take a long time. Pro athletes don't grow overnight. Star athletes don't grow overnight. They take time to be cultivated.
Yeah.
For every one big splash star or one person in your church who just comes onto the scene and is an amazing leader from the very beginning, you're going to need 100 others that took 10 years to develop into anything special and
Yeah.
and capable. So I know I've been talking a long time, but I just want to talk. That's the need for leadership development is the reality that leaders don't grow overnight,
That's
and
right.
it's
Yeah.
not pro sports, and you can't just outsource and hire the free agent leader for
Mm-hmm.
all of your teams. You can do that for a couple of staff, maybe. You can
Yeah.
go out and find somebody, but every team needs capable leaders, and you can't outsource all of that.
That's right. So much of it in the church is reactive. And it's kind of the difference in, us talking about discipleship in the church being a process and not a program. Leadership is treated the same way because nobody can see past the volunteer needs, the gaps in the volunteer system. Like we need somebody to do this, and so we finally just get somebody there, and then try to help them along, teach them, and make them better. Instead of thinking about leadership development in the church as an ongoing thing, as a culture. I know we speak of it, Scott, as a culture, and not an event. Just this one thing in time that we're going to do. And I think that has to start, on the front end. We first need to develop people in character and in knowledge and in a more broad sense to have them prepared then for various places in the church where niche training can happen. I mean, we can go deeper helping people perform well in a particular area of ministry. But if we're not investing in them as leaders to begin with, to build them up, to be competent and to have the character that we need, then we're behind. We're always behind. And we
Mhm.
can be working on that. Our process can be building people up and some of them may not even be immediately deployed, though hopefully they're serving somewhere, but they might not immediately be deployed into the perfect place for them. But we've been working on them and they know that they're being worked on. I mean, it's not a secret that we're investing in people's lives,
Yeah.
so that they are ready when the time comes. But um, it is something that you have to change your mindset on, um, and get away from thinking I've got a particular job that just has to get filled by somebody, to how am I going to raise the competency, the character, the wisdom, and the knowledge of everybody in my church to whatever level they're capable of reaching.
Mhm.
Um, and and then me thinking, all right, I've got this massive pool, and how can we optimize for the best places for everybody to be?
Yeah, that's right. That's a good segue then to the next point here, which is there. What are the benefits? So we know what the need is. Then we need a leadership pipeline because we need leaders, and it takes time to grow them. We What are the benefits of a pipeline? Well, the benefits then of a pipeline are that this might sound really basic, AJ, but most churches don't even know what are even all of the leadership roles and opportunities in our
Yeah.
church. Maybe individual teams know, but at scale, we don't really know. You know how many and how many of each thing do we need?
Hmm.
And are we staffed enough? Do we have the minimum number of greeters that we have to have, or do we have enough to be who we want to be?
Yeah.
Or are we just scraping by on children's ministry volunteers? And what do we mean by that? What are the different roles within children's ministry? Because it's a different thing to be asked, hey, will you go serve in children's ministry? People hear that differently than, can you help with children's ministry security team? Oh, like you say to me, you want to go serve in children's ministry? It's immediately no. But if you say, we need someone to be on the security team, I might go, well, what would that look like? That's a different request.
Hmm.
So having a pipeline clarifies what the opportunities are for people. Having a pipeline obviously identifies who are your leaders that have the highest ceiling. Oh, this is a person who has potential maybe to serve as an elder or as a key board member or on our admin council or whatever it is you have. You can begin to identify those folks early so that you can cultivate them intentionally into these
Hmm.
higher level leaders. It provides a pathway for advancement. So people sometimes think, gosh, they look at a person who's volunteered as a second grade Sunday school teacher and they've been in that spot for 20 years. Now, have they been in that spot for 20 years because they really love it or because there's nowhere else for them to go? There's no opportunity for them to grow as a leader. So having a pipeline clarifies not only what the available opportunities are, but future available opportunities are. And then the last thing I want to say on that is that having a leadership pipeline maximizes the potential of every member. By when you clearly understand what all the positions are in all the places at every level, now you start looking at all of your people and going, we've got we've got 100 people at our church or 200 people or 300 or 1,000, however big your church is. Every person has a place in the pipeline. Every person does. What is it? And we can help them uncover their calling. If
Yeah.
we're to equip the saints for the work of the ministry, it's our responsibility to help them understand what the ministry they're called to.
Yeah.
So, but if you don't have a pipeline, you can maybe do some of those things, but not all of those things. Or you can do some of these things some of the way, inconsistently, but a true leadership pipeline enables consistency in all of those things that I just mentioned at every level all the time.
Yeah. 100%, man. Amen. I got to give a personal shout out. And I do this frequently with churches. I mean, just a snippet of my testimony is being in a church, being discipled in a church with such intentionality in building leaders that it changed the course of my life. So I got a shout out to Antigua Bible Church in Fort Worth, Texas, now Central Bible Church, and our pastor, Dr. David Daniels, for having a strong vision of developing leaders. And I had the opportunity to be in an environment that I was able to be, just instructed and trained and explore, how God created me. And I would not be, Scott, I wouldn't be sitting here with you, wouldn't be involved in this ministry had that not been the environment in which I was
Mm.
discipled as, as a as a believer growing up there. So yeah, you know what, guys? Hey, you could change the entire course of someone's life. And but you know what? You don't this is not even what you need to go for. You just need to go for, being, I think, responsible to the call that God has put on us as leaders, and that is to grow other leaders
Hmm.
and to equip people for the work of the ministry. You
Yeah.
know, that's our basic biblical call. And we're talking about just having some structure behind that, some real intentionality.
All right, I want to our last key point here for why you need a pipeline is let's talk about what happens if you don't have one. Um, Largely, you know the consequences of not having a pipeline if you're listening to this.
Dun, dun,
Um,
dun.
well, I mean, you just know you got it. You're relying on the same people all the time, and it makes you feel bad when you call them up and go,
Mm.
"Oh,
I know. Yeah.
hey,
Yeah.
I hate to ask you, but are you available to do XYZ thing?" And you call them because you know they'll say yes until they stop saying yes and they leave your church. Lots of times that
Mm.
happens. There's no way for them to say no, so they just stop coming.
Yeah.
Um, a lack of depth, and you don't have a bench. So when someone retires or someone passes away, you're scraping the bottom of the leadership barrel and you're replacing qualified leaders with warm bodies. And
Yeah.
and you a lot of us have been there and we know what that's like. You have a hard time filling vacancies. I hear this a lot from churches that have a committee on committees, or they've got a nominating committee, or
Yeah.
is another way of calling that. They'll go, we've got a nominating committee and their job is to fill all these roles, and they can't find people. And so
That is
if
not
you're listening
leadership
to this,
pipeline. Yeah.
huh?
Yeah. That's not a leadership pipeline.
No, 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 no. No, it's not. That's usually one of the first things I recommend eliminating if we when
Well,
we as we implement the pipeline is like, if we're doing this right, we don't need a nominating committee.
yeah.
But
I mean, here's an example, Scott. We were just talking about this morning. We're constantly updating our international mission projects list, and
Mhm.
in a new opportunity that has come up is to work with a church in Cuba. And so one of our teammates,
Mhm.
Ivan
Mhm.
Garcia, he's a pastor down in Houston, and he immigrated here from Cuba, I don't know, 10 years ago, something like that.
Yeah,
Um,
I think he got his American citizenship
uh-huh.
just a few years ago.
Yep, yep, yep. So yeah, we love Yvonne, and so anyway, he's talked about, he and I going to Cuba for a long time, and so we have a particular church, and so here's the situation. Well, Cuba is a communist country. People don't exactly want to stay there. They like to leave. And so there's this church that has had actually a lot of success. They've planted a lot of churches. They've experienced growth for it's about 100-year-old church, but they're losing leaders. I mean, people are wanting to leave. I mean, who can blame them? I mean, you're stuck in communist Cuba. You would like to go someplace better. But, and that's not necessarily the point. The point is the pastor is looking for help in developing leaders in the church because he's seeing the beginnings of plateau and decline from a church that had been historically healthy, and he's attributing it to the loss of leaders. So,
Mm-hmm.
so because the church, and no matter why they're leaving they're not leaving the church because it's an unhealthy church. It's because they're seeking something better. But he sees if he could build leaders better in the church, in cooperation also with a kind of a refresh on vision. It's just time to do that refresh. That he believes the church can get back on a growth trend. So that's kind of a practical thing that's playing out right now, because there is a connection between the quantity and quality of our leaders and our abilities in the church to live out the commands of Christ in a healthy way, and see gospel expansion in our area. So yeah, so I hope, hey, maybe that's let me just slip a commercial in here then, Scott, because that trip needs to be funded still. So we've got lots of projects like that all around the world. So if at malfirstgroup.com/donate, you can get more information about that and join our Operation Gideon, which is a relatively low cost entry point for your church to be a mission partner with us to make the Cuba project and others happen.
Let me wrap us up and conclude this episode by simply saying this. When we lose healthy leaders, we lose our lampstand.
Mm.
And if you think, man, yeah, I don't have a pipeline, but we're scraping by, there's a limit to that. Eventually, it doesn't matter what your mission and vision and values and all of these things is one of the things we teach. All that stuff that we work on as strategic envisioning is really important, but it only works with leadership. And when you have no leaders, you have no vision. And so to fail to raise up leaders is a pathway to losing your lampstand.
Mm.
And so you need a pipeline. If you want your church to have a future, you need a leadership pipeline. So does every church need a pipeline? Yes, every church needs a leadership pipeline. So we'd love to work with you on that. If you go on our website, you can learn more about how we work with churches to help them build a leadership pipeline. But also just tune into our non-series series. Don't panic that we say we're having a series. But I would encourage you to listen to the next few weeks, because even if we never work with you, you're going to glean a lot of good information over the next few weeks on the podcast.
I hope so. So this has been episode 241 of the Church Revitalization Podcast. So malforsgroup.com/241 has today's article with the audio, the video, anything you would want over there. Go check that out. And we'll be back with you next week talking about, you guessed it, Leadership Pipeline. So stick around for that. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Scott.